Welcome, and thank you for standing by for today's conference call. At this time, I need to remind all participants that today's conference is listen-only. However, we will be doing a question-and-answer session today, at which time all parties will be asked to press star 1 to ask a question or get comment. At this time, I also need to remind all participants today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections to this recording, now would be the time to disconnect. We're going to go ahead and get today's conference call started. Our first speaker today is Ms. Caitlin Gordon. Ma'am, you can begin.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, today. Thanks for joining us. So today I'm going to split the presentation with Rennie Shen, who is from S5, I'm Product Marketing Manager, and I'm Caitlin Moore from EMC, also Product Marketing Manager. We wanted to talk to you today about the combination of powerful solution that you get with EMC Data Domain and F5 Networks. Just to right up front, a couple of logistics to let you know. We will take Q&A at the end, and you can do that through text. At the end of Q&A is when we will announce the winner. So you need to stay on the line until after the entire presentation to find out if you win the iPad. So do stay on the line through the Q&A, and we will choose from the folks that are left at that point during the meeting. So a quick overview of the agenda that we'll go over today. We'll talk about some information challenges and how those are impacting the IT infrastructure today. Talk about the solution between S5 and Data Domain, some of the key benefits there. Give you an overview of the pieces of the solution as well as the joint solution. And then talk to you about a great customer success story that really shows the true benefits in a real customer environment that you could see as well. So to start off, I don't think any of this is going to be a surprise to anyone, but these are really the challenges that we're seeing that are having the biggest impact in the data center today. Data growth. I don't think anyone's going to question the fact that data is growing at an enormous rate. The latest study we have from IDC says about a 44x growth rate from now until 2020. And it's really unpredictable growth. So you can't necessarily tell where it's going to come from or what that data is going to be. So it's becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Because of this data growth, backup times are becoming increasingly harder to meet. So your backup windows are remaining the same 8-hour window that you had all along, but you have a significantly more data to back up in that same amount of time. So that increases your backup times or your media consumption, so your costs go up, management time goes up, and the entire infrastructure really gets stressed. And this is really the main reason why we see so many people looking at re-architecting their backup infrastructure. And then overall, because of this data growth, your storage costs, both on primary and secondary, can get out of control because you have to continue to acquire and manage additional storage capacity. And all of that's happening with budgets that are really strained, certainly not growing, and something that you need to continue to keep under control. And what we found from a lot of customers is not necessarily the amount of money you're spending, but how you're spending it. About 3/4 of IT budgets on average are used at simply maintaining the environment as opposed to more proactive business-driving initiatives. So what the solution that we want to talk to you about today really provides is to address each of these issues in a very specific and targeted way. So when using a data domain system with F5 together, you can lower your storage costs because you can actually automatically and non-disruptively tier your inactive data from your primary storage to a data domain system. And because the data domain system is a deduplication storage system, when you move it off your primary storage to the data domain system, you greatly reduce your total storage capacity consumption. In addition, because you're moving data off your primary storage and onto a very efficient data domain system, you're going to significantly reduce your backup time and cost because you're backing up less data because you've removed it off the primary, as well as the fact that you're using the most efficient backup system available. You will dramatically reduce your backup times required for full backups. You can reduce the storage consumption on average 10 to 30x. And because of all that, you can actually retain your backups on-site longer with less disk, which most importantly allows you to eliminate tape for operational recovery. And then importantly, on top of all of this, is because of the deduplication technology and the efficiencies it provides, you'll be able to replicate very efficiently over your existing networks. Data domain systems deduplication allows you to only move unique data over the WAN. You get to achieve up to 99% bandwidth efficiency, which will really provide you cost-effective disaster recovery. A little bit about data domain systems and how they work in any environment, and then we'll specifically talk about how they work with F5. So data domain systems have had a lot of success simply because they're so easy to integrate into any existing environment. So in a basic data domain implementation, you have a control tier and a target tier, as well as in most scenarios a disaster recovery tier. Now the control tier can be anything from a traditional backup or archive application or an F5 appliance. So you see what happens is a control tier will send data over either CIFS, NFS, DD-Boost, and DMP, which will all use Ethernet, or if you have an existing fiber channel infrastructure, you can send over the data domain system can emulate a virtual tape library, and you can leverage your fiber channel infrastructure. And then once the data has been ingested into the data domain system, you get on average about 10 to 30x data reduction in a backup scenario, and then you can replicate efficiently to a secondary system because only the unique data is going to be sent over the network. So you see all of these different workloads can come into a single system, so you can have your backups as well as your file tiering and your archiving all coming into a single system. A little bit about how deduplication works to understand at a high level the secret sauce behind how we get such efficient storage. This is in a traditional backup environment, but it gives you the idea. So if you look at the top of the right-hand side, you'll see on the first Friday, you do a full backup, which is about 1 terabyte of capacity. And on average, on the first backup, you're going to get about 2 to 4x reduction. So in the end, you end up actually only consuming 250 gigs of capacity on the system. Now, throughout the course of the week, each weekday, you do an incremental backup, which the first day is about 100 gigs. And usually in an incremental backup, we'll get about 7 to 10x. And so you only require about 10 gigs to protect that 100 gigs that you backed up. The same thing throughout the week. And then the second Friday, you have another full backup, which is about the same terabyte. But you see what's happened throughout the week is because you have already backed up all of the redundant pieces of that 1 terabyte, you get up to 50 to 60x on that second full backup. So you only require 18 gigs to protect that full terabyte backup. So you'll see over just 1 week's time, you've backed up a total of 2.4 terabytes, but it's only required 308 gigs to protect that. So it gives you, in aggregate, a 7.8x reduction. And that's just in 1 week. Over time, that progresses to 10 to 30x on average. So a data domain system, as I talked about earlier, can really support a variety of environments. It supports really any kind of workload or data type in your existing infrastructure. So traditional backup with VMware, as well as Microsoft applications, Oracle, SAP, that would be leveraging any of the leading backup applications. Or with primary storage, leveraging an archive or file tiering like F5 ARX, as we are here to talk about today. And you can see on top of all this, in most implementations, we do have the option to replicate to a disaster recovery tier off-site as well. Now I'd like to pass it to Rennie to go over F5.
Thanks, Caitlin. So I've been looking at the data deduplication space for a while, and it's always looked like a really cool technology. And it's really exciting to see EMC take it beyond its traditional use case of data protection and into that of general purpose file storage. So the next step then for most of you would be to figure out how you would integrate a deduplicated storage system from EMC into your existing file storage infrastructure, right? Beyond your backups, but into your general purpose file storage infrastructure. Now the challenge is that most of you already have a bunch of file storage devices in your data center, and taking advantage of something like a data domain solution would mean migrating files from their existing location, which today is a task, as I'm sure most of you know, a task that incurs a lot of operational disruption as well as significant IT overhead. So F5 ARX is a complementary solution that helps simplify the process of integrating data domain storage systems into your existing file storage environment. And what the ARX does is virtualize the file storage environment and decouple the logical access to files by users and applications from their physical locations on storage. Now, the way that it performs this decoupling is through what we call a global namespace, right? So every file storage device today already has a namespace. This is the collection of physical CIF shares or NFS exports that the device presents to users and applications. And what the ARX does is federate all of these physical shares and exports across multiple disparate local namespaces into a much smaller number of virtual shares and exports in a single global namespace, right? And then it proxies any user access to files through these virtual shares to the right physical location where those files are actually stored. Now, because the ARX proxies file access, you now have the ability to move files from one location to another, one file system to another, or even one device to another without disrupting your users and applications. And then finally, as you can see at the bottom, the ARX provides intelligent policies that help manage that movement and placement of files, right, from a one-time data migration project to ongoing storage tiering capacity utilization balancing. So it's the combination of a global namespace and intelligent data management policies that can help you seamlessly integrate EMC data domain storage systems into your existing file storage environments. Now, a quick point is when I talk about seamless integration, I'm not just talking about migrating a couple files over, but rather automatically migrating any and all appropriate files at any time to the data domain system and continuing to do so over time so that you can maximize the CapEx and OpEx benefits that it can provide. So how does the file virtualization technology used by the ARX actually work? So this slide provides a really simplified view of your file storage environment, right? At the top, you have your users and applications, and at the bottom, you have your file storage devices. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ARX acts as a CIF and NFS proxy between users and their storage. So, in effect, the ARX looks like a file storage device to our client systems, and it looks like a client system to our file storage devices. So you can see that delineation in the middle, that horizontal line in the middle, delineates the virtual global namespace, or what our client systems see from the individual physical namespaces of all of our various file storage devices. So here, our users and applications are mapped to a single CIF share on the top right, where they can create, store, and access all of their files. And this virtual share federates or aggregates capacity from two physical shares behind it. So what I mean by aggregate is if, say, each physical share is 500 gigabytes in size, then the virtual share is going to present the aggregate capacity of 1 terabyte of storage space to our users and applications. Now, the really cool thing here is that these physical shares can be provisioned from different types of storage without client systems ever knowing. So if we were interested in implementing storage tiering, for example, then the physical share on the left could be our high-performance Tier 1, and the physical share on the right could be our deduplicated Tier 2 using EMC data domain. So now I'm going to create some files. From a user perspective, you can see that they all appear in the virtual share, right? However, the ARX is going to automatically physically place them on Tier 1 since we just created them, and we're going to assume that they're in active use or have high business value, so we're going to want the higher performance of Tier 1. But then, let's assume that you've created an age-based tiering policy on the ARX to automatically migrate individual files to our data domain system over time. You can actually create policies based on a number of criteria, including last modified time, last access time, file type, file size, etc. But now, you can see that our files are being physically moved to Tier 2. However, as I mentioned earlier, the ARX moves files completely transparently to users, so they still have full access to these files through the same virtual share, right? And the ARX is going to proxy any access to, through the virtual share to the new location. And of course, if you ever modify a file again, the ARX can automatically re-promote it back to Tier 1 since it probably has high business value again. And then, as I mentioned, you can also create policies based on other criteria, such as this one, based on file type. So let's say that you have a problem with your users all creating PST files in your home directories. Now, here, we've created a policy that always places PST files on Tier 2, where we can reduce the storage consumption using data deduplication. And although this example doesn't show it, we can also place all of your PST files on a separate dedicated physical share as well, where you can back them up more often or less often than your other data, or have easy access for compliance reasons. So now, let's put our ARX and data domain solutions together, and you can see what the joint solution kind of looks like on this slide, right? Instead of connecting to individual storage devices, users and applications now connect to a unified storage pool federated by the ARX's global namespace. And behind the ARX, you have your high-performance file storage devices, your existing high-performance file storage devices, as well as your new EMC data domain deduplicated storage systems, and the ARX proxies, sys and NFS traffic to both devices. You also have a second data domain system at a secondary location, possibly remotely connected over the WAN. And now let's take a quick look how everything comes together. So as I alluded to earlier, this joint solution really highlights the value of storage tiering. And with storage tiering, what we're trying to do is match different types of data with the most appropriate type of storage. Typically, we try to put data that has high business value, is in active use, or has high performance requirements on storage that is optimized for performance, such as SSD or SAS or Fiber Channel. And then, as its business value declines or it becomes inactive, we want to move our data to storage that is better optimized for capacity and cost, such as deduplicated storage. Now, while there are many ways to implement storage tiering, there are a few interesting points about this particular joint solution. First, the ARX tiers at the file level, which is particularly interesting because files provide an inherent business context. They have all these attributes, such as when they were last accessed or last modified or what type they are, that you can use to help gauge their business value and create more effective tiering policies. Second, the ARX gives you the capability to tier from any file storage device to your new data domain system. You can mix and match best-of-breed systems or technologies into multiple storage tiers, and the ARX will help you get the most out of each by automatically moving your files between them as appropriate. And then last, the ARX provides your users and applications with transparent access to all of their files, regardless of what tier they're currently on. So we already saw how the ARX acts like a sys and NFS proxy, and what this really means to you is that your users have no idea where their files really are, whether they're on this device or that one. And because of this, you can get maximum benefits or maximize your benefits from data deduplication without having to have any user interaction. And of course, what the data domain brings to your tiered storage implementation is a dramatic reduction in your total storage capacity requirements using best-in-class data deduplication technology, and the amount of savings that we've seen can really be significant. Depending on the policy that you create on the ARX, we typically see anywhere from 50 to 90% of all of your data tiered to the data domain system. And once there, of course, we can apply inline data deduplication to reduce its total storage capacity footprint. The next benefit of the joint solution is the ability to optimize your data backups. And we actually do this in a couple of different ways. Of course, the first thing that we do is use the data domain system as a target for our full backups. And this really isn't anything new at this point. The benefits that data deduplication can offer for disk-based backups are pretty well understood. And many of you probably already have data domain systems that you've deployed for this purpose. But let's say then that you have a multi-layered backup strategy and you perform full backups, say, at weekly, monthly, and quarterly intervals, right? Today, you perform all of these backups to your data domain system, and however many times you back up the same data, it doesn't consume any additional disk capacity, or at least very little additional disk capacity, because of that data deduplication. However, it still takes time for your backup applications to run against your file systems. You still need a backup window, and there's still a significant performance impact when doing so. What the ARX can do is help reduce the amount of time required to perform your weekly full backups, so you can continue completing them within your allotted backup windows, even as the total amount of data that you have to back up continues to grow. If you think back to the previous example with storage tiering, for example, let's say that you created a policy, right, that tiered every file that hasn't been modified in the last 90 days from Tier 1 to the data domain system. Well, now, you no longer have to back up your Tier 2 every week because you know that nothing on it has changed in the last 90 days. And this means that you no longer have to back up, say, 80% of your data on a weekly basis, which means that you can perform correspondingly your weekly backups in up to 80% less time. And not only that, but now 80% of your inactive data is sitting on the same data domain system that already contains your backup images. So this means that the data domain system is now deduplicating data across both your live data and your backup images. So you're going to get even more savings. And finally, the joint solution provides a very simple and effective way to ensure data protection and disaster recoverability. So if you deploy a second data domain system at your secondary data center, you can use its Replicator software to replicate all of your data changes between the two data domain systems. So the first really cool thing here is that the Replicator only transfers the deduplicated and compressed unique changes across the WAN. So it's only going to require just a small fraction of the bandwidth, the time, and the cost of traditional replication methods. And those of you who may have already deployed data domain systems in this manner can probably attest to the benefit of achieving up to 99% bandwidth efficiency. But the second cool thing is, let's not forget that because the first data domain system already has all of your inactive Tier 2 data, as well as the backup copies of your active Tier 1 data, that this very simple and very efficient replication scheme provides protection for all of your data easily and at low cost. So now, let's take a quick look at a case study of an organization that's already using this joint solution today. So the challenges that this particular local government organization was facing, they're certainly not unique, right? They all boil down to one thing: the rapid and unsustainable growth in the amount of file data that they had to manage. So how much data was that? Since 2008, this particular organization was seeing their data storage requirements grow at 100% annually, right? Essentially doubling every year, and this was really driven by two primary factors. First, they had a county-wide document imaging initiative where they were essentially scanning all of their existing paper documents into electronic form, and this was generating several gigabytes of TIFF images every day. The second factor was they had a new DR initiative at the time, and that required them to maintain or keep or store or retain multiple copies of every file across both of their sites. So not only were they generating a large amount of data on a daily and annual basis, but they were also instantly doubling the amount of storage capacity required to store and protect it. And compounding this challenge, of course, because there's always compounding factors, were the macroeconomic factors, right? In 2008, we were entering a major recession, and this particular organization was operating under a zero budget growth mandate. So what this meant for them was that they had a flat storage budget that they needed to somehow stretch to cover double the amount of data every year. So this government organization took a hard look at all of their data, and what they discovered was that 85 to 90% of it wasn't ever being used at all. So what they did is they deployed a pair of ARX devices to virtualize their file storage environment and implement a heterogeneous tiered storage infrastructure to unify these best-of-breed solutions for SSD, general purpose disk, and EMC data domain deduplicated storage. And they used the ARX device to create specific tiering policies where files, as they're created, they're automatically placed on their Tier 1 fast disk. If they haven't been touched in over 60 days, the ARX automatically moves them to this organization's Tier 2 SATA disk. And if they haven't been touched in over 120 days, they're automatically moved to the Tier 3 deduplicated SATA on the data domain. And of course, since 2008, they've also added what you can see on the left here, the Tier 0 SSD tier for their applications that really need high performance. Now, to protect their data, they're, of course, as I mentioned earlier, backing up all of it across all of their tiers to the data domain device, which they use to reduce the total amount of storage capacity that they need to purchase and manage. So the data domain is now deduplicating data across their live Tier 3 data, as well as the backup images of their Tier 1, Tier 0, and Tier 2 data. And then finally, they replicate all of this to their secondary site using the data domain replicator software to meet their DR mandate, as I mentioned earlier. So what about the benefits? So using this very simple storage tiering scheme, this company was, or organization, sorry, was able to immediately reclaim 10 terabytes of their expensive storage capacity off of their Tier 1 systems, which actually allowed them to defer any additional purchases of this high-cost SAS disk, right? They were able to satisfy the growth in their data with the storage that they already had. They were also able to move over 90% of their file data over time to their data domain system, where they now see a deduplication ratio of 10 to 1. But all of this, at the end of the day, all of this technology is really just a means to the end, right? What this organization was able to accomplish was satisfy the growth in their storage capacity requirements driven by 100% data growth every year since 2008 with a zero growth in budget. Okay, so what are the analysts saying? Last year, ESG took a look at the joint F5 and EMC solution, and they determined that implementing a storage tiering strategy with ARX and data domain can not only reduce your capital costs, but also dramatically reduce your ongoing operational costs as well. It's a really good read, and if you're interested, you can download this great document off of both the F5 and the EMC websites. And then finally, we have a bunch of other collateral that you can also download to get more detail on the joint solution, including a solutions overview as well as a white paper, as well as a trial download of F5's Data Manager software, which is really just the kind of like a SRM tool light for files, right? It goes out and scans all of your file systems to give you an idea of how old your files really are, what types of data you have, things like that. So that was the end of our presentation. I hope it was all educational for all of you. And now I think we're going to move into our Q&A session. So, Jeannie, I think we were going to...
Okay. Yes, anyone wishing to ask a question online, all you have to do is press *1 at this time. State your name with the prompting. *1 to ask a question. *2 should you need to withdraw a request. And, sir, it can take just a moment for questions to start coming through.
Okay, so while we're waiting, I think we have a couple questions that were submitted through the live meeting tool. So I think the first question is for you, Caitlin. It says, Alexander Sapp says, are the dedupe stats accessible from the data domain appliance via SMIS or via the SLI?
So they are available through a few different options. One would be the CLI. Another is the Data Domain Enterprise Manager, which is the web-based GUI interface to manage the system. And then alternatively, you can get the deduplication stats via SNMP, and that is how, for example, Data Protection Advisor and other data management applications get the deduplication stats, as well as many other.
Okay.
And I have questions online as well, sir.
Oh, excellent.
Want to go that route now?
Yes, please.
Okay. George, Herbert, your line is open then, sir.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. How many tiers can this support? Apparently at least 3, but are there any limitations on that?
Yeah, so the ARX device actually supports, obviously it's technology, so it's not unlimited, but a very large number of tiers, effectively unlimited, right? The number of tiers, what the ARX really does is migrate between one location and another, and you can create policies for any number of tiers from, we've seen customers deploy, up to dozens of tiers, whatever you need to satisfy your particular data management requirements. And
okay.
I believe you have a second question?
One more question. Are we able to implement, besides migration policies, deletion policies with the device?
So if I interpret you correctly, you're asking if we can implement a policy on the ARX to automatically delete a file after a certain period of time. Is that correct?
Well, that sort of thing, yes.
Okay. So we don't do that today, but we can certainly create a policy, after a period of time to migrate, or based on other characteristics or a combination thereof, to migrate it to a certain location where you can certainly take proactive action. Does that make sense? To a separate physical tier on the back end that you know about, and you can always keep an eye on to delete if you really want to.
Yeah, the slaughterhouse, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Final question. Are we able to get a copy of your presentation?
Sure. I think we're making the presentation available. It's certainly going to be on demand afterwards. So I don't know, Jeannie, do you have a?
We are actually recording this conference and sending that to you, sir.
Very good.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Are you ready for the next question?
Yep.
Next would be, and I didn't get a name. I think it's John. John Katz. Check your mute button, sir. John? John?
Hello?
There you go. Now we can hear you, sir.
Okay, I had on mute. I guess the question was answered just earlier. The meeting, the PowerPoint meeting live, it wasn't popping up, so I couldn't see the PowerPoint, but my question was that is this going to be sent, and the PowerPoint that you guys went over today can be sent out to everybody or not?
Okay. I will go ahead and go on to Roberto from Canada. Go ahead, sir.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, good. I wanted to first say that, yes, live meeting for myself as well completely wouldn't work through our firewall, so I'm kind of flying blind right now. But I was wondering, how does this, the solution scale for number of connections? Like, cause it seems to me to be like kind of a pass-through type of solution, and how does that scale for number of connections?
Oh, that's a good question. So the ARX actually scales in a number of different ways, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it's basically a SIS and NFS proxy. It follows a, you can think of it as a network switch architecture. So we actually have a range of ARX boxes from very small to very big. The very small one is a virtual device to a very big proprietary hardware switch, right? And each device provides the same software functionality, but differ in terms of various attributes, such as how many files it supports and the exact number of connections, right? So we definitely support many dozens of dozens of connections. So depending on your specific environment, we probably want to get an SC in there to like figure out what your exact performance needs are, how many connections do you need, and then they could recommend the exact device for your needs.
And I was also wondering that if I was introducing a network compliant SIP solution within this environment as a means to also be able to migrate out of it, how does it translate with the network compliance's deduplication at the same time? Not to try and confuse it with other vendor solutions, but if we were looking to move away from there, how does that play well?
Yeah, so that certainly plays very well. The whole algorithm for deduplicating and undeduplicating is really something that's performed by the storage device, right? So as you would migrate any file off of the NetApp device and onto the EMC device, the NetApp would undeduplicate, if that's a word, right? The file as we're moving it off, and then the EMC data domain would rededuplicate it, as we're moving it onto their device.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yep.
I do have other parties as well. Are we ready to continue?
Yep.
David Bruno, go ahead, sir.
Hi. Currently, I'm using my ARX devices to front-end the Celera storage that we have. We're using 2 tiers within the box, different pools, a high-performance pool, which is fiber channel, and the tier 2 pool is regular SATA. What value does the data domain solution that you just presented bring to me?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to take this, Caitlin, or if you want me to run with this.
Why don't you take a shot at it, and I'll jump in.
All right. So you can think of, the Celera, the tiers that you currently have in your tier, Celera, as optimized for performance and then optimized for, medium-term storage, right? But when you really want to get into a long-term archive, when you have all of this data starting to build up, you probably wanted to move it to a tier of storage that's really optimized or more optimized for cost and capacity, right? So if you move it to the data domain device, you can apply data deduplication to it. It shrinks effectively the total storage footprint of these of your data, so it's really consuming a lot less disk capacity, right? And then, of course, if you use the data domain also as a target for your backups, you're going to also see, increased savings in the amount of disk capacity that you need to have total. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Okay. So basically what you're saying is that
the data domain is better suited for the dedupe than the Solera.
Yeah. So I mean,
okay.
I don't believe that the Solera supports deduplication today. So
So yeah, I mean the basic difference, if I can jump in there for a second, Rennie, is that although Solera does provide some level of what is referred to in some instances as deduplication, what it is really is on a file level.
Yeah, actually, we're not even using dedupe right now. We're just using it, the second pull as a tier 2.
Okay.
But I just wanted to understand the fine points, the difference between the data domain and what we're doing now, because that might come in handy for us to complete with the data domain.
Yeah. And at the highest level, it's exactly, they're optimized for very different things, right? The data domain system is built as the data store of last resort. It is built for backup and file tiering as a secondary storage, whereas Solera or VNX is more built as a performance, as a high I/O or as an ingest, or as a higher performance I/O as opposed to built purely to give you the fastest ingest performance. And the reason that it is able to give you such efficiency is the deduplication technology, which works, as I was about to say, works on a subfile level versus what kind of deduplication you see in a NAS device, whether it's Solera or another vendor's, is really just on a file level. And if you look at that from a backup perspective, the difference in the reduction is something about 5x compared to about 10 to 30x of what you get with file level versus subfile level deduplication.
Okay. Good.
Are you ready for the next question? Yep. John Katz, your line is already open. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. No, my previous question was already answered earlier. The live meeting is not popping up, so the PowerPoint was just wondering if that's going to be sent out or not.
Okay, great. So we'll definitely take care of that.
Thank you.
And that's all the questions I have at this time online.
All right, Rennie, do you want to answer the few that we've got in text here? Yeah, so the next question I think is from Troy Hyatt. So apologies if I mispronounced your name. So Troy asks, go through a recovery scenario for files from tape backup. Where would they be restored to? Now, I believe if you were to restore a file, typically the ARX integrates with your existing backup processes. So you use mount-based risk backups or NDMP backups. And if you were to restore files, you're basically, off of the physical file systems behind us, right? So that's how you benefit also from the reduction in backup times. So if you were to restore the files, you would probably restore it back to the original physical file systems directly, or to a separate scratch space where you can, examine all your files and restore the individual ones that you want. Now, the ARX also has a virtualized snapshot capability where if we go with the scenario that the gentleman mentioned earlier with the Solera and data domain, we can actually virtualize snapshots across all of your devices, and then you can basically present that global namespace for snapshots, if you will, back to users for end user self-restore. Okay. So the next question, if we don't have any more, is if we don't have any more live questions, is
no live questions, sir.
Okay, great. So does the ARX support tiers that are not disk, optical, or tape? So today we don't have any devices that we support that are that we've officially qualified that are based on optical or tape-based technologies. But essentially, all the ARX really needs is SIS or NFS front end to as a target or source for our storage tiering policies. So if there's a device that you're looking at in particular, I definitely encourage you to contact us and see if we can take a look at that device. Okay, so Jermaine Vincent asks, with F5 ARX having a global namespace functionality, how does it play with Windows DFS? So the global namespace of an ARX is actually very complementary to DFS. You can think of it as DFS on steroids, right? So we have a number of customers that have deployed ARX both independently as well as underneath the DFS layer, right, for disaster recovery reasons. So the biggest difference between ARX and DFS is that DFS provides a global namespace based on directory level redirection, right? Whereas the ARX, within your global namespace, we actually redirect or proxy at the individual file level, right? So that's how we can have a single virtual share comprised of multiple different storage types that we can then migrate files or tier files between these storage types. Okay, so the next question is from Gail Hartland. Gail asks, does the ARX affect throughput of the primary storage? And so the answer is kind of goes back to my answer earlier for the number of connections. So we do have a range of devices, and each device has a different amount of a throughput, as well as connections, as well as files that it can support behind it. And this is mainly a function of the number of ports on that device. So again, if you are interested in this kind of technology, I'd encourage you to reach out to an F5 or an EMC SC so we can get in there and really find out what type of solution best meets your needs. And then what's the next question? So the next question is from Carl Swanson. Is it possible to move data to 2 tiers at the same time? In other words, make a local copy. So today, that's not possible with the ARX. And then I believe the last question in the queue that I see is from Dave Martin. If your data centers are hundreds of miles apart, do you need one ARX in each center? So you assume different NAS islands. So first of all, typically we deploy ARXs in clustered pairs. I mean, the reason for that is that we're putting a device in front of NAS devices, right? So we don't want to introduce a single point of failure. We want to maintain the same level of availability that you have for your existing NAS infrastructure. Typically, these NAS devices are deployed as active-passive clustered pairs. So if you have different NAS islands with different data and you wanted to replicate between them, then yes, you would need to have different sets of ARX devices at each location, as well as if you wanted to operate the second data center as a disaster recovery site.
Rennie, I think there's actually one more I see here I want to make sure
great.
we address is, can I deploy data domain for backup and tiering? And this is a really good question. It's actually something we see a lot of customers do, so you can absolutely do that. Is if you are using data domain for backup with your backup application today, and you want to now look into implementing an F5 system with a data domain as well, so you can implement some file tiering as well as your backup to the same system. That's absolutely something you can do and something we see a lot of customers doing.
Excellent. Thanks, Caitlin. So, Jeannie, are there any?
No, sir. No questions at this time.
Okay. So I believe we're going to be making the presentation available after the fact. And oh, one last thing. So we wanted to announce the winner of the iPad. So that winner is randomly selected was David Bruno. So David, congratulations, and we'll probably reach out to you afterwards to figure out how we get this iPad to you. So congratulations again, and